Here's the corrected and revised version of your story with spelling errors fixed, punctuation added, and character names changed. I've kept the content exactly as it was, only adjusting for grammar, clarity, and the new names. The narrator is now Sarah, 18F. Her mother is Linda, 43F. Her father is James, 45M. Her stepfather is Mark, 42M. And her stepbrother is Ethan, 15M. Sarah's mom, Linda, always wanted a son. Then she got one through her stepdad, Mark, at Sarah's 18th birthday. Linda put salt in Sarah's food and smirked. Now, she's being evicted from James's house, and her wedding is on hold. Growing up, Sarah, 18F, always knew her mother, 43F, wasn't happy with having a daughter. Linda repeatedly told Sarah and anyone who would listen that she was stuck with her after an unfortunate twist of fate. This wasn't something she mentioned once or twice. It was a constant cloud over Sarah's childhood. When Sarah was little, she never understood why Linda treated her cousins differently than her. They visited often, and Linda would hug them, praise them, and buy them gifts. With Sarah, she was always cold and critical. Nothing Sarah did was good enough. Linda had strict rules about what Sarah could wear. Pink clothes, dresses, and skirts were absolutely forbidden in their house. She made Sarah wear boyish clothes and only allowed her to play with boy toys like cars and trucks. Sarah's hair was always kept short because Linda claimed it was easier to manage. Sarah didn't understand why these things mattered so much to her. Linda also had strong opinions about other women. If a woman at her workplace got promoted, Linda would say she must have slept her way to the top. When a classmate got good grades, Linda would claim their mother must be having an affair with the teacher. According to her, women couldn't be trusted. Linda constantly pushed Sarah to make friends with boys instead of girls. She said boys were more helpful and trustworthy, and that girls would just stab Sarah in the back. Eventually, Sarah stopped trying to make female friends altogether. Sarah thought they were a normal family until she was 14, when her father, James, 45M, announced he was having an affair with a coworker and wanted a divorce. Their supposedly perfect family was suddenly falling apart. Linda moved them into a motel while she figured out what to do next. She was furious all the time, especially whenever Sarah mentioned wanting to see James. Linda accused her of betraying her, of being just like other women who couldn't be trusted. Sarah tried explaining that she needed both her parents, but Linda wouldn't listen. To his credit, James never spoke badly about Linda in front of Sarah. He apologized for the affair and admitted it was a terrible mistake. He explained he had been unhappy in the marriage for a long time, but took full responsibility for his actions. He promised to answer any questions Sarah might have when she was older. Despite the divorce, James remained supportive. He paid child support consistently and let them stay in the family home to provide stability for Sarah. They established a regular visitation schedule where Sarah would see him every other weekend. After the divorce, Linda became obsessed with finding a new husband before James could move on. She started going to bars and clubs several nights a week. That's how she met Mark, 42M, a DJ who had a son named Ethan, 15M, 3 years younger than Sarah. Mark had raised Ethan alone. From the moment Ethan entered their lives, Linda treated him completely differently than she treated Sarah. She bought him new shoes and shirts regularly, constantly praised his accomplishments, and bragged about him to her friends. At first, Sarah thought she was just jealous. But even James noticed the difference in how Linda treated them. Linda started asking James for more time with Sarah, claiming she wanted her to join them on trips. Later, Sarah realized she just wanted her out of the house more so she could spend time with Mark and Ethan. After dating for only a few months, Linda announced she was engaged to Mark and they would be moving into the family home. Sarah was shocked, especially since the house actually belonged to James. James demanded that Mark pay rent, which led to arguments. Linda accused him of trying to sabotage her relationship because she was finally happy. James reminded her that he only let her stay in the house because of Sarah. Mark eventually agreed to pay rent. The initial living arrangement seemed reasonable. Mark and Linda took the master bedroom. Ethan got the guest room, and Sarah kept her own room. Ethan and Sarah actually got along well and often played video games together. Sarah was happy to have a stepbrother. Things changed when Ethan complained about the guest room bed. Linda had promised him a new bed, but instead of buying one, she switched Sarah's bed with his without asking her first. Sarah came home one day to find her belongings moved and her bed gone. When she confronted Linda, she said Ethan deserved a good bed and that Sarah should make sacrifices because she was older and needed to adapt to her new life. Meals became another battleground. If Ethan wanted seconds at dinner, Linda would serve him with a smile. If Sarah asked for more food, Linda would scold her and call her a fat cow, despite the fact that Sarah was athletic and healthy. Linda started planning day trips with just Mark and Ethan, deliberately excluding Sarah. She claimed they needed to bond as a family, making it clear Sarah wasn't considered part of that family. When James offered to take Sarah to a baseball game, Linda insisted she should let Ethan go instead because he's a boy. James refused to take Ethan, and he and Sarah had a great time at the game together. As Sarah's 18th birthday approached, James wanted to throw her a big party to celebrate both her birthday and high school graduation. He offered to handle all the arrangements so Linda wouldn't have to do anything. Sarah was okay with his idea for a large celebration. Linda tried to downsize the party, suggesting they just go to a restaurant instead. She argued that a big party would be a slap in the face to Mark, who couldn't afford to do the same for Ethan. She even suggested they celebrate Ethan at Sarah's party too. James firmly refused, stating the party was for Sarah alone. He told Linda that if her new family didn't like the party, they were all uninvited. Linda grudgingly agreed. As the party planning continued, Linda started making more demands. She insisted on more vegan options because Mark was vegan. Sarah agreed to this to avoid conflict. Then Linda forbade fish because Ethan didn't like it. This time, Sarah refused to change the menu. The fish dish was her favorite, and she wanted it at her party. Linda shook her head and wagged her finger in Sarah's face, accusing her of being disrespectful and entitled. She threatened to ground her and take away her phone. That's when Sarah finally snapped. She shouted back that it was her party, her last celebration before moving out for college, and she had kept her mouth shut long enough about how Linda treated her. She threatened to report Linda to Child Protective Services and cut off contact after college if she didn't change her behavior. Sarah told her she didn't want a mother who never prioritized her anyway. Linda replied that all she wanted was for Sarah to treat Mark and Ethan as family. The confrontation seemed to shake her up, and she backed down. On the day of the party, Mark offered to play music. The event was going well, with Ethan, Sarah's cousins, and Sarah having fun on the dance floor. James was busy chatting with family and bragging about Sarah. Meanwhile, Linda stayed in the kitchen, drinking margaritas and avoiding everyone. Mark tried to encourage her to join the celebration, but she refused. James and Sarah didn't bother asking her to join for the cake cutting. They went ahead without her and made the most of the moment. Later in the evening, Sarah noticed Linda carefully preparing plates for Mark and Ethan, making sure they had exactly what they wanted. Sarah felt a pang of jealousy watching her serve them. Then, surprisingly, Linda brought Sarah a plate of food. Sarah was taken aback by this rare gesture of care and felt a warm, fuzzy feeling. She took a bite of the fish and immediately started coughing. It was incredibly salty, almost inedible. She asked if anyone else found the fish too salty, but they said theirs was fine. That's when Sarah noticed Linda standing nearby with a smirk on her face, shaking an empty salt bottle. Sarah realized she had purposely added too much salt to her food. When Sarah confronted her, Linda insisted it was just a harmless prank and a lesson for ordering fish, despite Ethan's preferences, and for being entitled. Sarah told her how nasty she was as a parent. She felt like Linda was trying to make her feel small and unimportant. Sarah narrowed her eyes and thought about how to get her revenge. Even now, thinking about this incident makes her blood boil. What Linda didn't know was that they had security cameras installed around the house, and one had captured her adding the salt to Sarah's food. Sarah decided to use this evidence, but she would wait until she was safely moved out. Update 1. It's been 3 weeks since Sarah's disastrous birthday party. She's moved into her college dorm with James's help. Most of her belongings are stored at his place, since there isn't much room in the dorm. She decided not to tell James about the salt incident right away. She didn't want to escalate the conflict while she was still living at home, even temporarily. Now that she's safely away and Linda can't hurt her anymore, she's ready to expose what she did. The past few weeks gave Sarah time to think about everything. She realized she doesn't blame Mark or Ethan for any of this. Ethan was just a kid who happened to be the son of the man Linda chose. Mark seemed like a decent guy who got caught up in Linda's issues. Sarah's focus was solely on Linda and her behavior. Moving into the dorm was a relief. Sarah's roommate seems nice, and they've established some basic ground rules for living together. Classes start next week, and she's looking forward to this new chapter of her life. Before she left, Sarah made copies of the security footage showing Linda salting her food. She saved it on her phone, her laptop, and a cloud account, making sure she wouldn't lose this evidence. Linda's behavior didn't improve after their confrontation. She continued to favor Ethan and make snide remarks about Sarah being selfish and ungrateful. The day before Sarah left for college, Linda had the nerve to lecture her about how she should call her regularly and come home for holidays. She acted as if nothing had happened, and they had a normal mother-daughter relationship. James has been incredibly supportive. He helped Sarah shop for dorm supplies, drove her to campus, and helped set up her room. He also increased her allowance to make sure she could afford books and other college expenses. They agreed to have dinner together once a month, just the two of them. Sarah received a text from Ethan last week asking how college was going. They've maintained a friendly relationship despite everything. He mentioned that Linda had been saying nasty things about Sarah since she left, claiming she was ungrateful and that she was glad to have her out of the house. This just confirmed Sarah was making the right decision by exposing her. Sarah spent hours thinking about how to handle this situation. She didn't want a big in-person confrontation that could get out of hand. She also wanted to make sure Mark and James knew exactly what happened without Linda being able to twist the story. The plan she came up with was simple but effective. She would create a group chat with Mark, Ethan, and James, explain the situation, and share the video evidence. This way, everyone would see the truth at the same time, and Linda wouldn't be able to control the narrative. Sarah wrote and rewrote her message several times, making sure to keep it factual and not overly emotional. She wanted to focus on the specific incident with the salt, rather than listing years of grievances. That would be more impactful and harder for Linda to dismiss. Yesterday, Sarah received a package from Linda. Inside was a sweater with a note saying, "For those cold nights at college." The sweater was 2 sizes too large, in a color Sarah hates, and made of a material she's allergic to. Linda has known about her allergy since she was a child. This wasn't a thoughtful gift. It was another jab. Another way to show she didn't care enough to know basic things about Sarah. That package was the final push Sarah needed. She decided it was time to send her message and the video. She wanted to do it in the morning when everyone would likely see it around the same time. She barely slept last night, going over her plan again and again. She knew this would likely end any chance of having a relationship with Linda, but she realized she didn't want one anyway. No relationship was better than one filled with constant criticism, favoritism, and cruelty. Sarah also prepared herself for the possibility that Mark might take Linda's side. After all, they were engaged, and he might choose to believe her over Sarah. Ethan was young, and she hoped this wouldn't damage their relationship, but she was prepared for that possibility too. James was the wild card. He knew Linda was difficult, but had no idea just how cruel she could be. Sarah wondered if he would regret leaving her with Linda after the divorce, even though she never blamed him for that. Tomorrow morning, she'll send the message and the video. After that, whatever happens, happens. She's endured years of Linda's treatment, and she's finally taking control of the situation. No more staying quiet, no more accepting her behavior. It's time for everyone to see the truth. Update 2. Yesterday morning, Sarah woke up early and sent the message she had prepared. She created a group chat with Mark, Ethan, and James. In the message, she explained the pattern of differential treatment she had experienced since Linda met Mark and Ethan. She made it clear that she didn't blame Ethan for any of this, and that he was as much a victim of Linda's behavior as she was. She described the salt incident in detail and attached the video from their security camera. The footage clearly showed Linda standing over Sarah's plate, emptying a salt shaker onto her food, then looking around to make sure no one saw her before walking away with a satisfied smile. Sarah ended the message by addressing Mark directly, asking if he was comfortable having his son around a woman who would deliberately ruin her own daughter's birthday celebration out of spite. Then she put her phone on silent and went to class, trying not to think about the bomb she had just dropped. When Sarah checked her phone after class, she had dozens of notifications. Mark had responded first, saying he would look into the situation and thanking her for sharing this information. His message was polite but non-committal. Ethan sent her a private message saying he had no idea Linda treated her that way, and that he was sorry. He asked if they could still be friends, no matter what happened between their parents. Sarah assured him they could. James called her immediately after she got out of class. He was furious. He confirmed that he had seen similar behavior from Linda during their marriage, but never anything this deliberate or malicious. He apologized for not realizing how bad things had gotten and for not protecting her better. He also mentioned that he had been thinking about evicting Linda from the house but had been hesitant because of Sarah. Now, he said he had no reason to hold back. He had already called Linda and given her a 1-month eviction notice. He said he had no sympathy for her and wanted his house back. According to James, when he confronted Linda, she initially denied everything despite the video evidence. Then she started blaming Sarah, saying she had always been difficult and ungrateful, and that she was trying to sabotage her happiness with Mark. James said he hung up on her mid-rant. Later that evening, Mark called Sarah. He said he had confronted Linda about the video, and she had flown into a rage, blaming everyone but herself. They had a huge fight, and he told her he was putting their wedding on hold until she got help for her issues. He thanked Sarah for showing him this side of her before they got married and before Ethan became more attached to her. Linda started calling and texting Sarah nonstop. Her messages ranged from angry accusations to tearful apologies to threats about what would happen when Sarah came home for holidays. Sarah didn't respond to any of them. Eventually, she blocked her number. The next day, Mark sent Sarah another message. He said he and Ethan would be moving out of the house at the end of the week. He had found a small apartment they could afford, while he figured out what to do about his relationship with Linda. He invited Sarah to visit them anytime and said Ethan would like to keep in touch. James called again to check on Sarah and to let her know he was planning to sell the house once Linda moved out. He offered to help her find an apartment for the summer, if she didn't want to live in the dorms year-round. Linda somehow got hold of Sarah's roommate's phone number and called her, pretending to be concerned about Sarah and asking about her behavior at college. Fortunately, Sarah's roommate was suspicious and didn't share any information. She told Sarah about the call, and they reported it to campus security. Sarah's still processing everything that's happened in the past 2 days. She expected Linda to be angry, but she didn't anticipate how quickly everything would fall apart for her. Sarah doesn't feel bad about exposing her behavior. Linda brought this on herself with years of mistreatment. Ethan and Sarah had a long video chat last night. He told her Linda had been crying non-stop since Mark announced they were moving out. She begged him to reconsider, promising to be better, but he said he needed time to think. Ethan seemed confused and hurt by the whole situation, but he reiterated that he still wanted to be Sarah's friend. Linda hasn't stopped calling or texting from different numbers. Sarah's blocked each new number as it comes up. She doesn't plan to respond to her. There's nothing left to say. Update 3. It's been 2 months since Sarah exposed Linda's behavior, and a lot has changed. Linda was forced to move out of James's house as planned. She found a small apartment across town and has been living there alone. Mark and Ethan moved out before she did. According to Ethan, Mark is still technically engaged to Linda, but they're taking a break. Linda visits them occasionally, but Mark doesn't let her be alone with Ethan anymore. Ethan told Sarah that Mark started noticing other concerning behaviors once he began paying attention. James put the house on the market and it sold quickly. He used part of the money to buy a smaller place closer to Sarah's college. He said it was a good investment, and this way Sarah would always have somewhere to go during breaks. She thinks he feels guilty about leaving her with Linda all those years, even though she's told him repeatedly that she doesn't blame him. Linda has tried different approaches to get back in Sarah's life. First, she sent more gifts, all equally inappropriate and clearly not chosen with any consideration for Sarah's preferences. Then she showed up at Sarah's dorm unannounced, causing such a scene that campus security had to escort her out. After that, she tried sending messages through mutual acquaintances, ranging from demands that Sarah apologize to her to claims that she was severely ill and needed Sarah's support. Sarah maintained her position of not responding to her. Each attempt at contact just confirmed that her decision to cut Linda out of her life was the right one. Last week, Sarah received a letter from Linda. Unlike her previous communications, this one seemed calmer and more reflective. Linda acknowledged that she had treated Sarah poorly but attributed it to her own upbringing and the pressure she felt as a single mother after the divorce. She asked for another chance and suggested family counseling. Sarah read the letter twice, then filed it away without responding. Maybe someday she'll be ready to consider rebuilding a relationship with Linda, but not now. The wounds are too fresh, and she needs time to focus on her own life without Linda's drama. College has been going well. Sarah's made friends who accept her for who she is and don't try to change her. She joined a study group for her most challenging class, and they meet twice a week. Her grades for the first quarter were excellent. Ethan and Sarah still talk regularly. He's starting high school this year and is nervous about it. She's been giving him advice and encouragement. Despite everything, she's glad to have him in her life. Mark reached out last month to let Sarah know he was seriously reconsidering his relationship with Linda. He said the incident with assault opened his eyes to behaviors he had previously dismissed or not noticed. He thanked her again for the warning and said he would always consider her part of Ethan's family, regardless of what happened between him and Linda. James and Sarah have dinner together every few weeks. Their relationship has improved now that they can talk without Linda's influence. He's dating someone new, a professor at a nearby college. Sarah met her once, and she seems nice, completely different from Linda. As for Sarah, she's focusing on her education and building a life that makes her happy. She started taking cooking classes on weekends and discovered she enjoys making elaborate meals, including plenty of fish dishes. She has no regrets about exposing Linda's behavior. That video forced everyone to acknowledge the truth about Linda's treatment of her, something Sarah had been trying to articulate for years without success. Sometimes Sarah wonders what would have happened if she had spoken up sooner, but she knows she did the best she could in a difficult situation. The security camera footage of the assault incident is still saved on her computer. She doesn't watch it anymore, but she keeps it as a reminder that she wasn't imagining or exaggerating Linda's behavior. It's proof that she made the right decision in cutting her out of her life. Sarah doesn't know what the future holds for her relationship with Linda. For now, she's enjoying the peace that comes with not having her constant criticism and manipulation in her life. College is challenging enough without that added stress. Ethan asked Sarah recently if she thought Linda would ever change. Sarah told him she honestly didn't know. People can change if they want it badly enough, but they have to recognize their problems first. Linda spent years blaming everyone else for her unhappiness. Sarah, James, her parents, her bosses, other women. Until she takes responsibility for her own actions, real change seems unlikely.